start talking about the human vision system. I normally discuss the human vision system not in a lot of depth, but at least the basic understanding of visual processing in humans, just so that you get a feel for what are the capabilities, and in image processing, what we try to mimic, right? And there are a lot of things that we do when we look at digital images or digital visual content that we try to cater for human consumption, right? So as a result, basic understanding of what the good things are about the human vision system and what might be the limitations, right? Those are things to keep in mind. So we'll start off with a discussion on that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the actual image formation process, right? So how do images get created, more specifically in the context of perspective projection, which is what typical sensors will use in order to capture a projection of the 3D space. And we'll also talk about the relationship between 3D to 2D and how we go use that in order to do quantitative measurements when you're actually working with images, digital images. Okay. All right, so human vision system in general, we want to try to understand, because like I mentioned, I think about a week ago, a lot of your brain is dedicated to just processing information that is coming through from the two eyes. Right? So 2/3 of your cerebral cortex and your sensory neurons are overwhelmed with just trying to process visual input. Okay? And as a result, there's a lot that goes on that is driven by visual processing in the brain. In fact, if you think of the different stages in which vision plays a role on how you actually perceive the world, you can think of it in terms of just the image formation process, right? How do you form an image from a 3D world onto a projection, if you will, in the brain, right? And of course, the sensor in that case would be your eye. And so if you want to understand what is the formation process, how do we actually get stimulated by light, if you will? And then there is the imaging process. So what is the optics involved, and how do things project onto the retina, right? Retina being our visual sensor in the human system. And what is that sensor comprised of, right? So it's a bunch of photoreceptors, and that is somehow forming if you will, a contiguous representation of the 3D space, right? So obviously when we look at the world, it appears continuous to us. Right? And how is this continuous world represented in the brain? So if you think of it, you look at the room, you see the 3D space, and everything is contiguous. Do you really think that that's how the projection is? Is that what your brain is sensing? I mean, this is something that we don't fully appreciate. Neither do we understand the complex biology that is involved, right? I mean, you can think of light sort of, reflecting off of all the surfaces in this room. Portion of the light is actually getting absorbed through your optics. It's projecting onto the retina, right? The retina is supposed to form an image. But do you think that it actually forms an image just like we think of using a camera? You take a picture using a camera and you get an image, right? Do you think it's the exact same process that's going on in your human eye? Is the eye equivalent to a camera, and you think we get this nice contiguous representation? And the answer is no, right? We don't. So there's a lot of processing going on beyond just the projection process that your brain is involved in order to recreate what we think is this 3D space. Obviously, our eyes don't have infinite resolution, right? So there might be other things in this room that are actually present, but we are just unable to perceive it. Right now, simple things, right? We have a projector going on in the room, right? There's light coming off of it, and we see this as, please come in. We see this as a nice projection on the screen, Right? There are tube lights, right, that are on in the room. They seem just, providing a constant source of illumination in the room. Do we think that is all true? Absolutely, it's what we see, but do you think that's true? Is that reality? Right? If I tell you that this tube light actually is flickering, would you believe me? It's continuously flickering. It's not constant at all. Right? It's flickering non-stop. Right? But that we don't understand, we can't perceive. That's right. Absolutely true. Right? So the projector is flickering as well. The light sources are flickering. It's just that we are unable to perceive it. It's just our vision system is not capable of picking up that reality. But it is reality. It's just that we cannot see it, and as a result, for us, this is reality, the fact that it's continuous, right? It's not flickering. So there are limitations in terms of what our optics are capable of perceiving, what our brain is capable of processing. But there are other things that we actually are filling in, right? There's information that your brain is actually filling in for you, which we don't even realize. Now, in most cases, that turns out to be great, right? Works for us because we live in a world where, it's filling in the information appropriate to our needs for processing and doing certain tasks. Other cases, those limitations actually fail us. Right? Well, hopefully not in a bad way. Right? So can you give me an example where, in real circumstances, outside of these examples of flickering lights, where your visual system might actually fail you? Right. I'm sorry? Sure, of optical illusions, absolutely. Right. But give me a good example of what, you observe in almost day-to-day life. Blind spots. Well, okay, blind spots, well, unfortunately, they're not optical illusions, right? That's a reality of the optics of the eye. So that's part of the mechanics, if you will, that results in a blind spot. Now, of course, as we walk around, yes, okay, well, that's true. But at the same time, right, if you think of it, we know physically your eye actually has what we call a blind spot, and we'll look at the actual mechanics of it. But when you walk around, it's not like, there's a patch of darkness around you, right? It's not there. Even though your eye actually is unable to perceive a certain portion of the space, it doesn't feel that you actually see that all the time, do you? So the brain is filling it in for you. What else might be a good example? Yeah. The road? Right. Well, okay. Mirage. Mirage is again, it's a physical phenomena. It's not an illusion, if you will. So it is a physical phenomena, and you interpret it in an appropriate way when we see certain variations in pressure, right? But it's not specifically an illusion created by the limitation of the eye. Now, perspective projection, right? When you have a pair of lines going in front of you and you think that they're converging at some point, again, that is not necessarily an illusion. Right? It's not a limitation of the eye. That's just the reality. That's just physics. Okay. Yeah. Well, we don't necessarily tend to ignore them. In fact, we tend to, expect that if you have smooth patterns, right, something that's continuous, that doesn't represent information that is absolutely vital. Right? So when you look at the wall, if you will, right? In the back, it's pretty much all a constant shade of color, right? In general, you're not going to see subtle variations if they exist on the wall. Okay? It's not that they don't exist. If you go really up close and try to find them, you'll probably find them because you're looking for them, right? But by definition, it's not going to stand out as something that's vital for completing a specific task, right? There are other things in the room that will stand out much more than